Trump. 1. The pharmaceutical industry. Radical. Lowering drug prices without introducing price controls. The population of the United States makes up 4% of the world's population and consumes about 13% of all prescribed drugs in the world, which is probably understandable since in Nepal and Zimbabwe, the population most likely receives very little or no prescribed medication at all. At least 70% of pharmaceutical profits. We consume 13%, but at the same time, we bring in 75% of the world's pharmaceutical company profits, which is not very understandable. Why? And suddenly it turns out that we pay 10 and sometimes even 15 times more than in other countries for the same medicines, in the same packaging, from the same American manufacturers or other manufacturers. Why do pharmaceutical manufacturers say that someone has to pay them back the money they invested in developing medicines? And that's a lot of money, but for some reason, that someone is us. The question is, why? More? And how is that? To change?
Me? This is one of the biggest medical announcements this office has ever made, because we're talking about lowering prices. As you'll see in a couple of minutes, it's incredible. For many years, Americans have paid the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. They paid much more, 10, 13, 15 times more than other countries for exactly the same product. The main reason is that American consumers have been subsidizing the costs of research and development for the entire planet. They put all of that on us, even though they were also beneficiaries, so that's changing as of today. That
is, we pay very high prices, and then selling the same medicines for 10% of the price of what they are sold for in the United States, or even less. I've had experience with this. I want to tell you, I used to buy medicine that cost me $800 for 3 months. That's the price without insurance. I'm not sure what it would cost otherwise. I went to Israel and found out that I forgot this medicine at home. In Israel, they sold me the same medicine from the same company without insurance for $23 a month. Well, I lied. $23.14. Per month, I mean for 3 months. If I used to pay $800 before then, I would have had to pay. Multiply by 3, that's about $75, not $800. Even at $80, it's still not $800. Naturally, I bought a year's supply, and since then I've been buying medicine in Israel, but that's just nonsense.
The United States has only 4% of the world's population, consumes just 13% of all prescription drugs, yet pharmaceutical companies get 75% of their profits from the United States. So think about that. We have 4% of the market, 13% of prescription drugs. And yet, Albert, I didn't know you were so aggressive. Is that so? I'm surprised you agree with this. I'm listening to us. Come here. Come on. No, he's doing the right thing. Thank you. And yet they get 75% of their profits from American buyers. So that's something. That's why I signed an order to fight this practice. And we signed it with great pleasure some time ago. Today, Pfizer is committing, just like other pharmaceutical companies will in the coming weeks, but Pfizer really is one of the biggest and greatest in the world. Today, Pfizer pledges to provide all prescription drugs to Medicaid at the lowest prices available in any nation. This will greatly reduce Medicaid costs. Think about it.
About the fact that government programs like Medicare and Medicaid spend billions on medications that can be bought in Canada, Mexico, Europe, or Israel for 10 times less. We, the taxpayers, subsidize these medications for the elderly, the sick, the unemployed, and single mothers, and yet we're the ones being charged 3 or even 10 times as much. But that's come to an end.
During my first term, I was so proud that for the first time in 28 years, drug prices went down. And I held a press conference and explained that it was 0.1%, but it was a decrease. But here we're discussing an increase of over 1,000%.
4 years ago, thanks to Trump's efforts, the rise in drug prices was stopped. And now prices will drop like a stone thrown from the Leaning Tower of Pisa. One of the giants of the pharmaceutical industry, Pfizer, which has a lot to answer for regarding one of the serious COVID vaccines, rushed to Trump and offered to invest billions in production in the United States under the supervision of the Food and Drug Administration, of course, and also offered non-American drugs for Medicare and Medicaid at half and sometimes even a third of the price. But the most interesting thing is that now there will be a drug sales page on the United States Department of Health website. For now, it's Pfizer, and maybe others will join, where anyone can order medicines at prices without intermediaries, that is, at manufacturer prices. This will immediately lead to huge competitive price reductions among all manufacturers and sellers. This is how, without twisting anyone's arm, but by using the power of competition, it will force everyone to lower prices several times over and not go bankrupt in the process. Well, there isn't a single corporation in the world that would say, "Let me go under, but I won't lower my prices." Well, maybe there will be one like that. All the world's pharmaceutical giants have already rushed to Donald Trump.
I can't say how important that is. And I was ready to start in the first term, but then COVID happened, and we had to focus on that. As I mentioned, I want to revisit this because we're seeing reductions of 14, 15, even 1,600% in some cases. But by taking this bold step, we are ending the era of global price gouging at the expense of American families and making America healthy again, which is our little theme for the people behind me. I'd like to ask Secretary Kennedy to come out, and we'll start, and we'll go through this with Oz, Klopp, Berlo, and Makari, and we'll go through it. And if you have any questions, but this is really a big announcement. It's something most people thought was impossible. And other countries agreed because we told them that if they didn't agree, they didn't necessarily have to agree. If they disagreed, we'd impose more tariffs on those countries.
What a wonderful leverage Trump came up with. By the way, I remember Archimedes, who said, "Give me a place to stand and I will move the earth." Trump brilliantly found a leverage point, and his leverage is the purchasing power of the United States market, which everyone wants to enter and is incredibly afraid of being kicked out of. And here's the United States Secretary of Health Kennedy, subtitles by Dima Torzak.
I told my son late last night, we all kept it a secret, but I told my 27-year-old son, Connor, who is a very liberal Democrat, I told him this was happening, and he just went silent for a minute and said, "Thank you, Dad. I'm so proud of you, Ed C." Because this is something Democrats have wanted for 20 years and Republicans have wanted for 20 years. Everyone said they would do it, but no one even took a step in that direction. It was President Trump who, thanks to his persistence and determination, saw this clearly, in a way that none of the rest of us did. In the simplest terms, why do we spend more on this country than any other country? Why do we spend 75% of the revenues that go to the pharmaceutical industry? We do all the research, and everyone else benefits from our work. And President Trump, I would say, persistently urged and pressured us to make this happen. I was getting calls at 11:30, at 12 o'clock at night.
Poll.
You're sleeping, you have to do R&B. And at some point, Dr. Oz told me, I can't take calls from the president anymore. I have a lot of reasons. My wife has a lot of reasons to tell me about different things that are happening in my life. Doesn't that make you anxious? I say I don't have anxiety, but that made me anxious.
That's the secret of a good leader. He always keeps all his subordinates in a fighting state. Just the fact that he calls, checks, that he's interested, that he might call himself and not have his secretary do it. It pushes, it inspires, it makes people do things they thought were impossible. And I'm glad that Trump gets satisfaction from the fact that all his employees talk about it publicly. God bless him with health. May he rejoice in his and our successes for many, many, many years. Dr. O. Z is responsible for providing medical care to all the sick, elderly, and needy in the United States of America. who used to be a television channel host before that. He is a doctor by training and participated in health education activities.
There is a fine line between vision and hallucination. People have to follow you for it to be a vision. And President Trump, you made many people follow you and an idea that most considered impossible, even remotely.
And
Now pay attention to how Trump negotiates.
I admit I know I'm on the president's speed dial and he usually called me. As Secretary Kennedy said, it was about most favored nation status. And he always had reasons why we needed to act faster or why people are suffering today because we allow the kinds of pricing that have been tolerated for so many decades in America. The time of day didn't matter. The day of the week didn't matter. And that's exactly how the president acted. It was such an important part of what he considered his legacy. That's why everyone here and many others are so proud to make it happen. And the focus with which the president approached this, he shared this with me on the day he nominated me for this position, and he often reminded me about it. Since then, this has become our top priority at Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Now, to do this, you need tactics, not just vision, but also tactics. The president's first tactic was introducing me to Albert Bourla over dinner with Secretary Kennedy. He insisted, showing his great negotiation skills. As you know, if you're going to make a deal of this scale, of this nature, you need trust.
Many times Democrats have written and said, how can Trump smile at Putin? How can Trump shake his hand? I'll say it again. In order to make any kind of deal, whether with the best or the worst person in the world, you need their trust. He needs to be sure that you're not his enemy. He wants to know that you won't stab him in the back, stab him with a wooden or maybe a tin knife. He can and should know that you have a different understanding, let's say, of politics. You don't agree with his actions, with his statements, but you're not his enemy and you're not luring him into a trap. You do everything with your visor up, which is incredibly important.
Chris Clamp came to visit Secretary Kennedy and me on the very first day when we were looking for staff to try to bring into the government. And neither of us really realized how difficult it could be. And he came for an interview and we knew that he had built a business that was worth several $100 million. The secretary, wearing his usual serious expression, asked him, "Are you ready to leave everything behind and move to Washington with your family? A young family, 4 small children, a beautiful wife? Are you ready to move across the country and serve our nation, serve this president, to ensure that such important programs as Medicare, which he manages, will keep our seniors healthy for many years to come?" He gave up everything, just like many in this administration, enthusiastically following the president and serving under Secretary Kennedy's leadership. And for those of you watching at home, and I hope there are many of you, I think this shows what a great place this is to work. And I am proud to pass the ball to Chris. Chris, tell the American people what they have gained thanks to your passion and your ability to deliver on President Trump's promises.
Trump can spot talent. And when he chooses himself, well, in this term, since in the previous term almost everyone was recommended by someone, these people are of high efficiency and usually of high moral character.
This is a major victory in the fight for affordable health care and affordable medicine. And as the president said, on average, we pay almost 3 times more than the rest of the wealthy world for branded pharmaceutical drugs. We contribute over 50% of global R&D, 50% of revenue, and nearly 70% of profits. It's unfair and morally wrong. And when this happens, we stifle innovation and limit access for the most vulnerable people around the world and in America who need these medicines. And that's why the president instructed us to make deals. That's what he does, and that's what we do. And all great deals, and this is a great deal, are based on principles. And this deal was based on the principle of fairness. The president could have told us to find the world's lowest medicine prices in the poorest country and bring them to the United States, using the power of the government to insist that this is the price we pay. And that could actually work for a short time, but very quickly. It would completely destroy innovation in pharmaceuticals. It would destroy American superiority in creating vital medicines. There are almost 20,000 known diseases on the planet, and we have treatments or medicines for far fewer than 10% of them. So that would be a bad strategy, and it would limit access for those who need these medicines the most. But he didn't suggest that, or propose a price 50% lower than the world's lowest. What he called for was fairness. That is a powerful principle. We all grow up wanting to support justice. And that allowed us to do what hadn't been done before, namely to reach out to the manufacturers and ask them to be fair. And it allows us to reach out to countries and ask them to pay their fair share in the fight against global diseases. And that's the key to this great deal. And now it's an honor for me to talk for a few minutes about the details of the deal. First, let's start with the definition. And you were looking for proof that this is a president who knows and cares about you, who fights for you, who fights for every American. This is exhibit number 1. This is not an empty promise. This is not platitudes. This is not a lack of a plan. These are tough contracts with commitments that lower prices, which we will all feel. These are the most significant, historic, substantial, mathematically proven price reductions in the history of our country. In modern pharmaceuticals, President showed us that the impossible can be achieved, and it happened today. With that in mind,
Thank you to him as well, who led the negotiation group. He traveled all over the world, explaining to governments, ministries, and manufacturers why what Trump proposed was good, and good for all of them, not just the United States. And as you can see, he convinced them. I mean, right now, of course, well, he traveled in the West, not in the quarters of the global South. In the United States, there is a position called trade representative. He represents the country. He's constantly flying all over the world, organizing and coordinating United States trade policy with other countries. His goal is to increase exports and protect the interests of our exporters. Here,
Jameson Greer,
Jameson Greer, a graduate of the Institute of International Relations in the United States, who also received a law degree. He spent 4 years in the Air Force. He is considered the architect of Trump's trade strategy. He also worked as a missionary for 2 years, then was the head of military justice in Turkey and Iraq. He was a legal advisor at the European Court and is 46 years old. He accomplished all that, gentlemen. Trump knows how to choose outstanding assistants.
The rise in spending on medications, that is, the increase in drug prices, is the fastest and most significantly growing area of healthcare expenses. Therefore, today's announcement has incredible implications for healthcare spending in the United States. And today marks the beginning of the end of the Great American, and it also marks the beginning of the end of the Great American tragedy that I have witnessed as a doctor at the patient's bedside. Patients go into financial rage, organize campaigns on GoFundMe, online, send repeated reminders asking for donations, involve their church to pass the donation plate from row to row. Sunday after Sunday, trying to raise enough money to pay for the medication. In the United States, the medication costs 5 to 10 times more than in France, Germany, or the United Kingdom. People get upset, and it's a tragedy. Having cancer is hard enough as it is. Getting upset because of financial rage, trying to raise money for treatment, makes it even harder.
You already understand the situation, both what has happened and a bit about what will start happening now. Actually, it's all simple. The prices of medicines prescribed by doctors will start to decrease rapidly. Now let's talk about the impact of this on the political life of the country. The Democrats will either say, well, finally Trump did something good, but then all the accusations. The image of a fascist, a bloody tyrant, a liar will become a bit suspicious. Could such a bad person really do such a good thing? Either the Democrats will start looking for something bad in what Trump did, and I suspect that's exactly what they'll start doing. But lowering the prices of prescription drugs will lead to significant changes, especially in the socio-political sphere. And of course, this will affect the electorate, not only of the Republicans, but also of the Democrats. Lowering the costs in such an important area of spending as healthcare is a significant political achievement. Democrats have discussed this since '95. Trump stopped the price increases in 2018, and now in 25 he is bringing down high prices, making medicines affordable. I mean, he's not just bringing them down, he already has, because Pfizer has already announced that they're cutting prices in half, even by a third, for many medicines. Pensioners, people with chronic illnesses, and recipients of Medicaid and Medicare will start paying much less for essential medications. The pharmaceutical industry is losing significantly. But because the project was kept completely secret, not a word leaked out anywhere. They didn't have time to bring in their senators, the ones they bought from Congress, to fight, and they didn't have time to rally crowds of Democrats for street protests. And now there's nothing left for them to do except stand on their hind legs. And they did.
So, the United States can fund research and development for the whole world. Well, that ends today thanks to President Trump. We
subsidized, if not the world, then the entire West, covering the costs of protecting them from the enemy. We subsidized half the world by letting their goods into our country, while at the same time agreeing that our goods couldn't get into theirs. They couldn't get in because either they imposed huge tariffs, customs duties, or simply didn't let them in at all. Now we're finding out that we also paid for all the drug research, which was then sold cheaply at our expense in the West and the East. What else are we subsidizing? No wonder we have almost $40 trillion in debt, which we pay with interest to the very same people and for the expenses that we subsidized for at least 80 years now. Just to be clear, that's when we started these subsidies. In 1945, the United States, the whole country, had a huge debt of $250 billion. Our debt has grown over the years by 160 billion, 160 times, 160 times. We pay $1 trillion a year in interest that has accumulated on our subsidies. Of course, those who rob us say, "How dare you not give us what we've already gotten used to?" I've always liked that. It's outrageous, you heartless imperialists. Subtitles: give us immediately the same as before or more, preferably more. And they also say that Americans don't care about their women, their elderly, their newborns. Americans don't work to live, they say. Americans live to work. As it turned out, we live to support you, our liberal progressive slanderers. Well, remember this date, September 30, 2025. All right, that's enough. We're adults after all. It's time to start living within our means and, most importantly, at our own expense. Subtitles. That's all.